Hey everyone, welcome back to English with AI. In today's video, we're diving into something super important for learning English phrasal verbs. You've probably come across these little phrases before, like ask around and act up or add up to. But what exactly are they? Well, phrasal verbs are combinations of verbs and prepositions or adverbs that give new meanings, sometimes completely different from the original verb. For example, did you know that when you say ask around, you're not just asking one person, but many people for information? Sounds cool, right? In this video, we'll break down some of the most common phrasal verbs, explain what they mean, and give you real examples so you can start using them like a pro. Ready to get started? Let's jump right in and make learning phrasal verbs fun and easy. So, the first one is ask around. This is used when you have to ask many people for information or advice. For example, I'll ask around to find out where the best restaurants are in the area. And secondly, I'll ask various people for recommendations or information about a good dentist. And lastly, if you ask around, you'll probably find someone who can help you with your homework. Add up. This is used when you have to make sense, be logical, to total or sum up. For instance, his explanation doesn't add up. I think he's hiding something. And secondly, the expenses for the trip don't add up. I think someone might have made an error in the calculations. And lastly, her story doesn't add up. Act up, to behave badly or cause trouble, to malfunction, machines, devices. For example, the kids were acting up in class today, and secondly, my phone has been acting up lately and keeps freezing. And lastly, the children started to act up during the movie, talking loudly and not sitting still. Ask out. This is used when you have to invite someone on a date. For example, he asked her out to dinner on Friday night, and secondly, I'm planning to ask her out this weekend, but I'm not sure if she'll say yes. And lastly, John finally worked up the courage to ask Sarah out to dinner. Add up to result in a particular total or outcome. For example, the total expenses added up to more than $500. 2. And secondly, all the small mistakes you've made today add up to a big problem. 3. And lastly, the total cost of the repairs added up to $500. Act on. This is used when you have to take action based on information, advice, or instructions. For example, the manager acted on my suggestion and decided to update the software. And secondly, the police acted on the tip-off and arrested the suspect. And lastly, she decided to act on the advice her friend gave her and applied for the new job. Agree with. This is used when you have to have the same opinion as someone or to suit someone. For example, I agree with your plan to hire more staff for the project. And secondly, I completely agree with your opinion on the new policy. And lastly, this type of food doesn't agree with me, so I'll avoid it from now on. Answer back. This is used when you have to reply, especially in a rude or disrespectful way. For example, don't answer back to your teacher like that. And secondly, don't answer back when your parents are speaking to you. It's disrespectful. And lastly, she always answers back to her boss, which gets her into trouble. Allow for. This is used when you have to consider or account for something when planning or making a decision. For example, you need to allow for extra time to get to the airport. And secondly, when planning the trip, you need to allow for possible delays at the airport. And lastly, the budget doesn't allow for any extra expenses, so we need to stick to the plan. Add in. This is used when you have to include something as part of a whole. For example, don't forget to add in the tax when you calculate the total cost. And secondly, the recipe calls for a pinch of salt, but I'm going to add in some garlic for extra flavor. And lastly, don't forget to add in the taxes when calculating the total cost of the purchase. Ask in. This is used when you have to invite someone into your house or space. For example, I saw my neighbor outside, so I asked her in for a cup of tea. And lastly, when the delivery driver arrived, I asked him in to help with the heavy boxes. Act out. This is used when you have to behave badly, often to express feelings or emotions, to perform. For example, the child acted out because he was frustrated. And secondly, we had to act out a scene from the play for class. And lastly, the children started to act out when they were asked to sit still for too long. Advance on. This is used when you have to move forward or closer, usually in a threatening manner. For example, the enemy forces advanced on the town as the army retreated, and lastly, as the deadline for the project advances on, we need to work faster to complete it. Apologize for. This is used when you have to express regret for something you've done. For example, I apologize for being late to the meeting. And secondly, I apologize for being late to the meeting. There was heavy traffic. And lastly, she apologized for her behavior at the party, realizing she had upset a few people. Account for. This is used when you have to explain the reason for something, to make up a certain proportion of something. For example, can you account for your actions last night? And secondly, the manager asked the team to account for the missing funds in the budget. And lastly, the sales of the new product accounted for 40% of our total revenue. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you now feel a bit more confident with using phrasal verbs in your everyday English. Remember, practice is key. The more you use them, the easier they'll become. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more English tips and tricks. And hey, if you have any favorite phrasal verbs or questions, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Keep practicing, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care and keep speaking English.